Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to my YouTube channel, From Darkness to Life Recovery Coaching, and my radio podcast, With Self Respect Leads to Self Love. I'm your host. Y'all know who I am by now. Thank you guys for joining me for this episode. If you guys like the commentary and you want to hear more, please on YouTube, don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, and notification button to receive notifications of my videos. And on my podcast, go to Spreaker.com/, with self respect leads to self love. You can also hear it based upon my name. And if you want to be a guest on my podcast and you would like to send me letters, or you need some type of advice, or there's a particular topic you want me to talk about, or you want me to basically talk to you about one-on-one coaching and how I can help you when it comes to coaching, when it comes to recovery and healing, then please email me at ashA.mariama01@gmail.com. That's ASHA.MARIAMA01@gmail.com. I hope you guys are doing well. Me, I am doing lovely this evening. Now, let me first say a little about me. I am a certified recovery life coach that's all about helping people on their paths and their journeys to a new and better you through self discovery. I help people when it comes down to healing and recovering on this channel when it comes to your self esteem, self worth, self values, you believing in yourself, even when no one else does, you not worrying about wanting to be loved, liked, appreciated, valued, wanted, needed, to be a part of something, to be validated, to be approved of, to be accepted, for someone to know your worth and proving something to people, as well as being seat fillers, Captain Save-A-Hole, Build-A-Bears, and Build-A-Dolls. Okay? How y'all doing? Me, I'm doing good. As y'all can see on this shirt right here, it's kind of going to be what the topic is. With self-respect leading to self-love when it comes to finding yourself. Now, everything on this shirt is a description of me. And I like shirts that basically describe who I am as a person. So if I was to wear this and I was to go out, I probably would have people coming up to me and trying to read the shirt. And I'm like, if you want to know me, everything on this shirt represents me in some way, shape, or form. I'm a queen. I'm a, I have semi afro. So beauty, love, strong, sexy. Um, Trying to see what the words on here. Sexy. I'm a nice person, sweet person, compassionate person. A person that is all about learning and growing, evolving to becoming a new version of myself. I'm all about being the best version of myself. Now, I talked about dopamine yesterday. And so a lot of people don't understand how dopamine plays a very big part of your self esteem, because we don't really talk about dopamine like that and what dopamine is and how dopamine impacts and affects your life when it comes to the way you make decisions and how you go about doing things. So when it comes to dopamine, I need people to understand that it's your motivation, it's your focus, it's your pleasure. It can even be considered a happy place. So what I want people to understand, that when it comes to dopamine, I need you to understand that dopamine is something that basically controls your addictions. So for example, if cocaine is something that gives you a high, you're going to want to keep that high because of the fact of the matter that your dopamine likes the feeling of that drug. If your happiness is in people, then that addiction is going to be people. And so dopamine is something that basically has a lot to do with your happiness and your emotions. So a lot of times when it comes to dopamine, we can somewhat get it confused and we end up making the wrong decisions and the wrong choices. Your dopamine also controls your cravings, your pursuits, and it also controls how you react to things, how you behave, and your actions. So that's what dopamine does. So when something doesn't make you feel good, then you want nothing to do with it. When you have something that does make you happy, then you're going to want to continue to deal with it. So it just really depends on that. So when it comes to addictions, that come from your dopamine. It just does. That's where it comes from. It comes from your dopamine. It comes from the way that whatever it is makes you feel. So for example, the reason why a lot of people stay in relationships longer than what they do is because of dopamine. Dopamine is how you end up with the codependency, the scared of being alone, and dopamine is also how people bamboozle you, lead you astray, influence you, and do all of these negative things to you. So dopamine is also the reason that you don't pay attention to your physical health. And so, for example, if you have somebody putting their hands on somebody, and even though the relationship is unhealthy, they'll still go back. Why? Because the dopamine is addicted to the person. So when this person puts you on this all-time high, you're going to want to remain on that high. So when things go wrong and it gets down to a low, you want to leave that person because the fact of that low. Because it's just like with cocaine. When cocaine puts you on a high, Molly, ecstasy, even ganja, aka cannabis. When it puts you up here, you love that feeling. But when you come down, you don't like the feeling, so you want to keep that up. So I have a video that I want to show y'all about dopamine and about addiction and how they go together. And the reason that this is important is because with dopamine and also dealing with the other side of it, and I just had it in my brain and I just forgot that easily. But we're going to watch this video about addiction and serotonin. That's it. Serotonin is a thing that counteracts that that dopamine. Because without serotonin, you'll be making all kinds of bad decisions. But let's get into the video and we'll get into it. But understand, this video is for educational purposes only. I am using this video to help others when it comes to healing and recovery through talking about dopamine and how dopamine is what causes all of our addictions. Okay. So this particular video is all about the addiction part of dopamine and why you have to be very careful on the high that you get in everything that makes you, far as pleasure, that makes you feel good. As Holly Berry said, I just want you to make me feel good. So I'm going to mute myself and then I'm going to share my screen and then I'm going to mute myself and then take myself so y'all can listen to the video. And then I will do commentary as I go through. So I just want to make sure I say this because sometimes YouTube will block a video. And I always say I use videos for educational purposes only. I'm not using, and matter of fact, I don't even have my PayPal or Cash App up. So this is for educational purpose only. So the person that see the video will see it's for educational purposes only. So that being said, let me mute myself and we'll get started.
Let's just think about addiction, because in biology and in psychology, frankly, it really often pays to think about the extremes first and then work our way towards more typical circumstances. And with that said, addiction, unfortunately, is very common nowadays. I just heard a statistic, in fact, that there is an 80% increase in alcohol use disorder among women in the last 30 years. I talked a little bit about this in the episode that I did about alcohol and health. Again, I want to be very clear. I'm not somebody that is completely against alcohol for adults, provided they're not alcoholics. Turns out 2 drinks a week, probably fine health-wise. 0 would be better. If we're honest, 0 is better than any alcohol, but 2 drinks a week is probably fine. Past 2 drinks, you start running into problems. And yet many, many people out there, male and female alike, suffer from alcohol use disorder, also called alcoholism. The same is also true for things like methamphetamine or cocaine or other types of substance addictions. And the same is also true for a lot of behavioral or what are sometimes called process addictions, things like sex addiction or video game addiction or any type of behavior that frankly is leveraging the dopamine system, but that engages this progressive narrowing of the things that bring someone pleasure, such that nothing else is really salient. Nothing else is really pulling them in the way that their video games or sex or pornography or alcohol, pick your substance or, behavior that you see out there, or hopefully not, but that you might suffer from an addiction to. So what's happening in addiction? Well, addiction involves dopamine, among other things, often the opioid system, et cetera. But if we were to think about what's the stimulus in an addiction and what's the peak in dopamine, and then what happens after that peak, it all becomes very clear as to why addiction happens and why it's so pernicious. So for instance, let's take cocaine. Cocaine causes dramatic increases in dopamine very, very fast. So if somebody craves cocaine, what are they craving? They're craving that dopamine peak. They're craving the increased level of alertness. They're craving a number of things associated with the feeling of being under the influence of the drug. But the stimulus for it simply becomes that line of cocaine. Or in the case of crack, that crack rock that they're going to smoke, and God forbid they're mainlining it, they're shooting into a vein. What happens is they snort, smoke, or inject cocaine, and dopamine levels almost immediately go up to a very high peak. Okay, so the time gap between the stimulus and the dopamine is very, very short. So short, in fact, that there's really no other contingencies in between that the mesocortical system has to learn. In fact, what does the system, quote unquote, learn? It learns cocaine equals massive amounts of dopamine equals feeling euphoric and energetic, et cetera. And in doing that, it reinforces the whole circuit so that short, we can even say hyper short contingency is really what the system wants. So much so that longer contingencies of, say, putting in the hard work of, generating a fitness program or a professional program for yourself or a education program, which takes not just many days, but many weeks and years. Well, none of that is going to lead to peaks in dopamine that are as high as the peak in dopamine associated with cocaine. So that tells us something critical. It is both the duration between desire and effect. And when I say effect, I mean the rewarding properties of dopamine that are experienced. That's important. So very short gaps teach the system to expect and want short gaps. Makes it very hard to pursue things that take longer. So when we say it's the short, or in this case, hyper short distance or time between the stimulus and the dopamine, what we're really talking about, if we were to plot this out on a board or on a piece of paper, is the steepness of the rise of that peak. It's very, very steep. The peak in dopamine is coming up very fast after the desire. And in addition to that, and this is very important, the higher the peak in dopamine and the faster the rise to that peak, the further below baseline the dopamine drops after the drug wears off. Okay, so in the case of cocaine, it's a very fast and very large rise in dopamine, followed by a steep drop and very deep trough in dopamine below baseline. You say, okay, so there's pleasure, then there's lack of pleasure. But it's worse than that, because it's not just lack of pleasure. If you recall what we talked about a little bit earlier, that drop below baseline triggers the desire and the pursuit for what? For more. And so this sets in motion a vicious loop where people start pursuing peaks in dopamine that can come very fast without much effort. And that's one of the ways in which addictions start to take hold. Now, there's a simple way to think about this and to remember if you want to avoid this whole thing. I mean, the first one is obvious. Don't do cocaine. Don't try it. Don't use it. Certainly don't get addicted to it. Those are all sort of one and the same, frankly. I don't know many people that, despite opinions to the contrary, that use cocaine recreationally, that don't at some point run into either a financial, psychological, physical, or some other problem. The other thing that's absolutely critical to keep in mind, and this was discussed in my colleague, Dr. Anna Lemke's book, Dopamine Nation, and on this podcast. Excellent book, by the way. I highly recommend it if you haven't read it already. It's a fascinating exploration into dopamine as it relates to addiction, not just drug addiction, but other types of addiction. Again, the name of that book is Dopamine Nation. We'll provide a link to it in the show note captions. The other thing that happens after those big, fast increases in dopamine caused by things like cocaine is afterwards, when it quickly drops below baseline, it takes a much longer time to get back to the original baseline than it did prior to using the drug. And worse still is that the peaks in dopamine that are created from more consumption of cocaine leads to progressively lower peaks and deeper troughs below baseline. So the whole system is shifting away from pleasure and more to pain and the desire for pursuit of the drug.
Okay, y'all. Why is this important? This is important because the same way that drugs and alcohol is the same addiction when it comes to being people pleasers, seat fillers, and Captain Save Hold and Build-A-Bears. The more you please people, no matter how much you destroy yourself, as far as your health and wellness, the feeling that you get from jumping when people say how high, the fact that you're willing to lower your self-esteem, self-worth, and self-value, respect, confidence, and believing in yourself when no one else does, just for a temporary feeling, temporary emotion that ain't gonna last long. Just like when you have sex, it gives you a great high, but it ain't permanent. It's temporary. But what people are willing to do for that dopamine is what makes it an addiction. That's exactly what makes it an addiction. The fact that what people are willing to do for it. The fact that people are willing to do any and everything just to be able to have that feeling is the problem. So it's not the fact that dopamine is necessarily a bad thing. It's the fact of the matter, the addiction that come with it. Now I get it. Being happy, being at that high is a great feeling, but it doesn't last. Feelings change all the time. And what people don't understand is we're not taught emotional intelligence. We're not taught how to distinguish and dissect our emotions to figure out what exactly are we supposed to be. You're being told to lower yourself in order to be with somebody else. Godly people are always lowering themselves to build other people up, and that's where the problem is. There's nothing wrong with helping people, but when you lose yourself in the process, it's when it's a problem. So just like he's saying, the same way that it is in drug and alcohol is the same way that it is with having sex, being workaholics. The fact that you're never satisfied because that dopamine is never gonna be consistent. It just isn't. Dopamine is only gonna be as long as it lasts, and it sometimes it don't last long Because once the dopamine goes down, that's when you feel lousy and you feel miserable and you feel sluggish and you feel like I don't even want to get out of bed. You go through this deep dark depression, anxiety. That comes from dopamine. But you can also have a physical type of dopamine where it affects you physically, meaning that you can be in a car and all of a sudden you have an anxiety attack for absolutely no reason. You don't even know why you have it and you're panicking. It's just like when you have a heart attack, dopamine can be the same way. So again, dopamine can work either way. Either it can be a high or it can be a low, but both are impacted. So there has to be a medium when it comes to dopamine. So that way when you keep it at an even playing field, then you're pretty much melancholy, meaning that you're either way. If you're happy, okay, cool. If I'm not happy, okay, fine. But at least I'm in the middle where I'm not going to have those addictions. So if I accept things for what they are, then that means I'm not going to have any expectations, which in turn, I'm not going to be disappointed, mad, or sad. So if you make yourself where you're not going to be mad or sad, meaning that you deal with the emotions, you deal with whatever it is that's going on. So when you let these people go, it's easier for you to do it. You're not wasting time and you're not staying in situations longer than you need to. You're not going to jail. You're not going to end up unaliving nobody because, like I said, it's the thrill, it's the chase of something. But the one thing about excitement, it doesn't last long. It don't. It's just like when people steal, they can never keep what they steal because you're gonna end up going to jail. You can't even take stuff to the pawn shop no more. You just can't at the end of the day. So again, the adrenaline, yes, it is cool at times when needed. If you're playing sports, but somebody who doesn't care if they win or lose, they just went out there to have a good time is gonna be better off than the person that wants to win or the person that's pissed off because they lost. But the person that just went out there just to have a good time is the person that's gonna benefit no matter what. So that's how dopamine works. But when it comes to self esteem, self worth, and self value, I need people to understand your self esteem, self worth, and self value, how you believe in yourself, how you think about yourself, the respect that you not only have for yourself, but the respect that you have that you expect people to have for you determines how you feel about yourself. So if you take that dopamine that you want from other people and put it within yourself, then you manage your dopamine. Meaning, if you're at peace with being at home watching a good movie, if you're at peace with just being by yourself, going out with yourself, then your dopamine is going to be at a peaceful place. Why? Because you're at peace. The minute that you bring somebody in your world, it's going to go up and down. It's going up. It's either going to go up or it's going to go down. There's not going to be an equal medium. So if you're with somebody and in the beginning they're treating you the way you want to be treated, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, they start treating you differently, then guess what? That dopamine is going to go down. And now you're trying to figure out why it is this person not treating you the way they used to. Because they're the way they feel about you, they weren't with you for the reasons you think. They're with you because of what you could do for them. They weren't with you because they genuinely loved you and they care about you. It's about what they can do, what you can do for that person. So I want people to understand that when it comes to dopamine, dopamine is what causes your addictions. It's what basically determines your self-esteem, self-worth, and self-values. It determines how you want to be treated. But when you start going away from your morals and your standards, so let me give you an example. Let's say you're a virgin and you meet somebody that's not a virgin. Am I going to deal with him? No, because he's a virgin. He's not a virgin. Why would I want somebody that's not a virgin if I'm a virgin? I want somebody to be a virgin. We go through this journey together. But nowadays, it ain't too many men that are virgins anyway. So, I mean, I'm just saying. So, I mean, that's the way I look at it. I would rather have somebody we going through this journey together than somebody already got experience and they're not going to really take me seriously. So, no, I'm good on that. So, I would rather have somebody that is going through the journey. So, let's say I'm celibate and this person is also celibate. So now, we're both celibate, not having sex, and now we're going to end up, or should we be together? No, we should not be together, especially when it comes down to, um, we be in two different spaces. So, like I said, when you're in a low place, do you want to boost up your dopamine? Absolutely, because if you're going through depression and anxiety, you definitely want to boost up your dopamine because your dopamine levels are low, which in turn means you might have depression, anxiety. You might not be at the best as far as when it comes down to that. But there are ways to boost your dopamine without having to use somebody else to do it. So, like I said, we're going to get into this other video where we're going to basically have that conversation about dopamine. But I just want people to understand that dopamine plays a very big part when it comes to your addictions and when it comes to things like that. So you never know how, dopamine is going to affect you. So everybody deals with dopamine differently. Understand that. We all deal with dopamine differently, and that's okay if we do. But just know that when it comes to dopamine, just know we just deal with. Sorry, I was clicking on something. So this video we're gonna watch is about 10 ways to naturally boost your dopamine, but also help you with your self-esteem, self-worth, and self-value. So of course, I'm gonna share my screen, and this video is for educational purposes only to help people when it comes to their self-esteem, self-worth, and self-value when it comes to healing and recovery. So let me share my screen, and then we're going to start on this video. So I'm going to mute myself, and then I'm going to come back after the video.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Top Think. Today we'll learn 10 ways to naturally boost dopamine. Now, let's begin. Every feeling that we experience is controlled by chemical messengers inside of our brains. When something good or bad happens, these messengers, also known as neurotransmitters, communicate with nerve cells throughout our brains to moderate our impulses and feelings. Among the many neurotransmitters that the body produces, one of the most important is dopamine, sometimes called the happy hormone. Dopamine serves a variety of functions in the body, but it's best known as part of the brain's reward system. When we experience something pleasurable, a dopamine rush creates a feeling of euphoria, happiness, and contentment. All right, let's say you're sitting down for a nice meal and you've just eaten something delicious. That tasty bite triggers the production of dopamine chemicals that carry signals to other parts of the brain and stimulate a sudden rush of happiness and motivation. Dopamine is the reason that we like winning games and earning money. It's a feeling that we chase, sometimes to the point of obsession or addiction. Too much dopamine can make us impulsive and reckless, but what happens when the brain doesn't produce enough of this important chemical? In the world today, many people are struggling with low levels of dopamine. Because their brains don't produce enough of it, these people often experience negative feelings like anxiety, fatigue, and even depression. The absence of dopamine makes us feel unproductive and empty. It sucks the life right out of the things that used to be fun, discouraging us from socializing or chasing our passions. It's common for people with low levels of dopamine to rely on overly stimulating activities just to experience the same levels of pleasure that they did before. Not only can this be destructive to their lifestyle, but it makes it hard to find happiness long term. Luckily, there are ways to boost dopamine production in the brain. Even if someone's dopamine levels have sunk to an all-time low, a few changes to their habits and mindset can increase production and bring back those feelings of joy and satisfaction. Yeah, it may take a little bit of work, it may require some hard choices, but if your dopamine levels have fallen too low, these 10 habits can kickstart your brain and bring happiness back to you. Number 1, the seesaw effect. Imagine someone spends hours every day scrolling through social media or playing video games. These activities release consistent dopamine hits, supplying temporary bursts of happiness and pleasure. But the longer you scroll, the harder it becomes to experience the same high highs. Not only do these activities become less stimulating, but you have a harder time enjoying other things like spending time with friends or practicing creative hobbies. Most people don't realize how significantly this kind of overstimulation can affect the brain.
All right, let's talk about that for a second when it comes to this. This is why I said I am taking a break from social media, meaning that when it comes to TikTok, one of the things I don't like about TikTok is the videos are too short and we're constantly just strolling versus it being like YouTube and you're actually doing actual videos as far as educational videos that may be 30 minutes to an hour long. Even on Facebook and Instagram and even YouTube, most of the time that you have YouTube shorts. And don't get me wrong, I'm not against YouTube shorts. I'm not. Every once in a while I do listen to them. Where the problem is that dopamine, eventually it will be too much and it does mess up your vision. It does mess up your mental health because you can't put your phone down, and it can become an addiction at the same time. So a lot of people that don't have friends and they're alone, that's their only way of communication is social media. And that's why you'll notice a lot of people that are on social media, it's their outlet, because if they was to be in four walls, they probably would lose their mind and go through a deep dark depression. Versus because back in the day when you were by yourself, you picked up a book or you went for a drive or you went to the mall, even if you didn't buy nothing, just to get out the house. Nowadays you can't do that because this world has become a lot more dangerous. So with dopamine, like I said, it's important that you get a equal amount of dopamine where it doesn't go too high, it doesn't go too low, it's in the middle. You want it where you're happy, but it's not that addictive happiness or the rock bottom of the lows. You don't want that. You want it to be right smack in the middle. So let's continue.
Studies have shown that the overuse of dopamine stimulating activities like scrolling or gaming can dramatically reduce the number of dopamine receptors in the brain. In other words, the more dopamine you receive, the less happy you feel. If you want to naturally boost your dopamine levels, the first step is to give your brain a much needed rest. Put away your phone, take a break from gaming, and for at least a little while, deprive your brain of these easy dopamine stimulating activities. It may take some time for your dopamine receptors to completely reset, but gradually they will. And when they do, you'll start to feel happier than ever.
Would you be interested in collecting 5-figure paychecks for a few hours of work, helping me in your spare time?
Number 2, conscious state meditation. Meditation is one of the best ways to increase your production of dopamine quickly and naturally. There are many different kinds of meditation, but the one we're most interested in is conscious state meditation. The goal of conscious state meditation is to expand your awareness of physical and mental processes by focusing your attention inward and blocking out distractions. But how does self-awareness and concentration affect your levels of dopamine? Conscious state meditation encourages a state of reduced readiness. In other words, it suppresses anxiety and in turn triggers the release of hormones like dopamine. One study found that conscious state meditation can increase dopamine levels by as much as 65%. So even if you only meditate for a few minutes each day, expanding your mind can make your life a whole lot happier. Number 3.
Before we get into number 3, this is something I'm getting into now. And I'm one of them people, it's really hard for me to sit down and not and sit still without my eyes opening. Because when you're a thinker, it's kind of hard to meditate. What I've learned to do is when I lay down and go to bed, that's when I meditate when I go to sleep at night. When I'm laying down and I'm just sitting here. Sometimes I'll sit here and I may not even cut the TV on. I may put my phone down and just for like an hour, like I'm about to start sitting outside, going for a walk when I'm able to drive again, get in the car and just drive. And even just go to the park and just sit around and just walk. I don't know where I'm going to end up at. All I know is that it's important to cut off electronics, because between working for 8 hours on a computer and working, being on YouTube, on the TV and your laptop, your tablet, your phone, you're on electronics and you're getting too much information. So I learned now there's a cutoff time. There's a cutoff time. Just like now, I could be strolling, but guess what? I'm not. I'm doing my podcast right now. So I've learned that doing my podcast has been very helpful to me, because number one, I don't have to look at anything. I can just talk. I don't have to really be seen. I can just say what I need to say and call it a day. Just like now, I'm going to bed. I'm laying down at 8:30. I might be asleep by 9. I might be asleep a little bit after 9, but who knows? So I'm going to go and take my medicine right quick, but I'm still going to be here listening because it's in the same room as me. So we're going to basically go to number 3, hack your REM cycles, and we'll see what this one is. So let's continue.
Hack your REM cycles. When do you produce the most dopamine? Surprisingly, your body produces the most dopamine when you're fast asleep. Studies show that dopamine levels spike throughout the night, specifically during periods of deep sleep called REM cycles. A typical 8-hour sleep cycle is divided into 3 to 5 REM cycles, which get longer as the night goes on. Your first REM cycle may only last 10 to 15 minutes, while your final REM cycle may last upwards of an hour and a half. This final cycle is when you produce the most dopamine. So how can you improve your sleep cycle to naturally increase dopamine? The goal is to maximize your REM sleep. Design your sleeping and waking schedule around your final and longest REM cycle, and that way, you'll wake up every morning feeling happy and productive. Number 4, the runner's high. How do you feel after a long run or a tiring workout? We tend to experience feelings of happiness and satisfaction after we exercise. This is especially common among long-distance runners. After reaching the point of exhaustion, runners may experience what's known as a runner's high, a temporary feeling of relaxation and euphoria. These feelings are caused by feel-good chemicals in the brain like endorphins and dopamine. If you want to increase your dopamine levels naturally, try incorporating exercise into your daily routine. Whether you like to run, lift weights, or practice calisthenics, most exercise routines are associated with increased dopamine production. Simply by challenging your body, you live a happier life and improve your state of mind. Number 5, mood-enhancing music. People say that music affects us like nothing else. Sometimes it evokes powerful emotions or it transports us to different environments. Other times it brings us down, reminding us of heartbreak, of grief, and sadness. But the right music can also turn our moods around with a rush of dopamine. The trick is to listen to music that makes you happy. Assemble a playlist of your favorite songs. They might be upbeat pop songs or nostalgic anthems from years ago. Whichever songs put a smile on your face, just add them to your playlist and listen to them whenever you feel down. These familiar melodies and rhythms may increase dopamine production in your brain, leading to positive changes in your mood and well-being. Number 6, bright light therapy. Most people spend the majority of their time indoors. We sit for hours under artificial light in front of bright computer screens, but sitting inside all day can affect our mood and state of mind. Many people report feeling down and unproductive when they go for long periods without stepping outside. Why? Well, because our bodies crave sunlight. The sun's bright light stimulates dopamine production, thereby decreasing stress and increasing feelings of happiness. Seeing the sun, even briefly, can completely turn your day around.
Feel confident about weight loss with compounded semaglutide injections, made with the same active ingredient as Ozempic, and a reliable supply you can.
Number 7, relieve stress for good. Stress is a natural dopamine inhibitor. When you're experiencing stress, your brain suppresses the production of feel-good chemicals. And that's often why you feel helpless and anxious when stressors pile onto your head. The more stress you experience, the more your dopamine levels may decrease. To increase your dopamine levels, start by decreasing your stress. Whenever possible, remove stressors from your life. Make your day-to-day activities as simple and as easy as possible. Actively identify new sources of stress and then combat them with little changes to your habits and lifestyle. Once you tackle those daily stressors, you'll be surprised how much happier you feel. Number 8, tap into your flow state. You might have heard people talk about entering a flow state. This happens when you're so absorbed in an activity that you hardly notice time passing. Flow is a state of focus and confidence, so it's no surprise it makes you feel good. As you become more immersed in your work, your brain is flooded with feel-good chemicals. Dopamine production increases, motivation skyrockets, and by the time you're finished, you may feel happier than ever. Tapping into this kind of flow state isn't always easy, though. Any number of stimuli can distract you or break your focus. But if you can immerse yourself in your work or passion projects, entering your flow every day, you can increase your dopamine levels quickly and naturally.
Okay, I'm gonna stop there for a minute. Now, when it comes down to these things that he's saying in this video, I agree with, because there are a few things that I'm working on. Number one is getting outside a lot more, and even if it means just me walking, even that means me just sitting in my car, I really want to get out, and I really want to get more sunlight. Another thing, too, is the reason we don't get to do this one in particular is because we work all day. We're not doing things that we're loved. We do things that are obligated. So paying bills are obligations. So it's kind of hard to do the things you love when you got to basically worry about whether or not you can take time off, whether or not you have the money to afford it. So that one is kind of tricky, like he said, but to be able to travel when you want to. So for example, if you want to get away for the weekend and you just need some time away, you might just go ahead and take your last and go on vacation and not even worry about the bills. That's pretty much what that means. It just means that I just want some time for myself. I want some me time. It's like saying you got the kids. How am I going to have me time when I got the kids at the house? I got a husband I got to take care of. When am I going to have me some me time? That's why in a marriage, it's important for a man to understand that a woman is more than just being a mother. She does need a break away from her kids. We all do. So at the end of the day, having that stress reliever to where it's even. So in other words, when you're by yourself, you do have peace. It's when you bring everybody else into your world, that's when your self-esteem, self-worth, and self-values are being messed with, because you're bringing people in your world that's lowering your dopamine. So yeah, they give you this high, but then when the relationships start going wrong, it comes down to this low, which in terms affects your self-esteem. So for some people, either they get mad very quickly and they get happy very quickly. Those people are dangerous people. But the ones that gradually get upset, they don't get upset for just any reason. There has to be a legitimate reason to be pissed off. Those are people that are better when it comes to keeping their dopamine, because they ain't gonna let nobody take away their dopamine. They're not gonna let nobody ruin their day. They're not gonna let nobody piss them off. They're not letting nobody do anything, because once they find their inner peace and tranquility, they're not trying to go back to negativity. So that's different between people that basically are more introverts and extroverts. So let's continue with number 9.
Number 9, the hormesis effect. Certain types of pain can lead to pleasure. This psychological phenomenon is known as hormesis and is much more common than you might think. Just imagine taking a cold shower. When you first step into the freezing water, it's shocking and a little bit painful, but afterward you feel refreshed and alert. Why? Because it naturally increases the production of dopamine in your brain. When the pain is over, you're left with a surplus of feel-good chemicals, making you feel better than ever. Now, of course, you shouldn't seek out painful activities all the time. Using hormesis too consistently can have adverse effects on your mental and your physical health. But in moderate doses at the right moments, a little bit of pain may be exactly what you need. Number 10. Activate your inner artist. People with the highest dopamine levels are often creative and practice one or more artistic hobbies like drawing, writing, or making music. Whether or not you're any good at these things, creative hobbies can function as a powerful dopamine cycle. The act of creating something gives you a rush of dopamine, and that rush of dopamine motivates you to create even more. So if you want to naturally raise your dopamine levels, get in touch with your artistic roots or incorporate a new creative hobby into your life. Find something you enjoy, something expressive that excites and inspires you. It doesn't matter if you're an artistic prodigy. Just by getting creative, you can give your dopamine levels a much-needed boost. Hey, thank you for watching Top Think, and be sure to
So this is why I say when it comes to dopamine, we need to have more conversations about this. And this is something that should be incorporated when it comes to how we raise our kids. Because don't get me wrong, pleasure can be a great thing, but dopamine is just a balance between pain and pleasure, happiness and sadness. So it's the balance between all of that. But based upon that determines your actions and behavior. So how you feel determines not only how you act, but also how you behave. So that's why your serotonin is so important, because that balances out the cortisone and the dopamine as far as the levels are in the endo I forgot what he said, but yeah, that's just something that's important. So when it comes to your self-esteem, self-worth, and self-values, if you base it on other people and not your own happiness, then you're going to be addicted to people, because you're going to want that high of the way people make you feel. If you're someone that loves sex and sex is your way of having your happy place or your pleasure place, then if you don't have it, you don't know what to do. So some people without sex, they're going to be miserable because they don't know anything else except that. So that's where your addictions come from, is from dopamine. So let's say, for example, you're going through a deep, dark depression. What are you going to do? You're going to go eat. You're going to do something that's going to help make you happy. Or like some people say, the best way to get over an old person is get under somebody new. That's still dopamine. When you're just trying to feel good, like in Monsters Brawl, when Holly Berry said to Billy Bob Thornton, I just want to feel good, make me feel good. There you go. So there are some people that got to have people around them because of the dopamine that come with them and the feeling they get about being around all these people. Doesn't mean that it's healthy, but that's what happens. So then when people are committing crimes, that's also dopamine as well. So dopamine can be in many different forms and many different many different functions. So you just got to be mindful of that. But dopamine is also, when it comes to food, when it comes to your weight, all of these different things are factors in it. So you have to learn to have the balance to where you're not trying to get too much dopamine, but you're trying to get enough so where you won't get into that depression, anxiety, and all those negative things that make you have these addictions. So once we learn more about dopamine and we start teaching dopamine, then kids will make better choices, adults will make better choices, and we'll be healthier based upon dopamine. If we stop basing things on how we feel and base things on what's going to be the best thing for us, then things will probably be different. But until we do that, we will continue going through the same things we've been going through. So with that being said, I just wanted to come on here and do this short video and this short podcast to let y'all know that we are going to go more in detail about dopamine. We're going to go into the serotonin, and we're going to go into these things that cause the addictions. And also by doing this, it will help boost your self-esteem, self-worth, and self-value, and making you into better people. So with that being said, speaking of which, I'm about to go take my medication. I'm about to go eat, and I'm going to lay down. Well, lay down. I may not go straight to sleep, but I am going to lay down. Because again, dopamine is something that's important. I said to myself from this day forward, I'm going to make sure I get 8 hours sleep. Watching this video has definitely given me a lot to look forward to. So I'm definitely going to be outside more. I'm definitely going to be staying off my phone more and strolling more. I've been talking about this. It's funny, I said something about it in my last podcast, and now I'm actually doing it. So it's pretty much amazing. But like I said, when it comes to your health and wellness, that is something that's really extremely important. So with that being said, I just wanted to do this short video because I felt like that if people don't understand the power of dopamine and how it impacts and affects your life, it will definitely make you want to make better choices. So with that being said, I appreciate y'all and thank y'all for joining me for this episode. Y'all know who I am. I appreciate y'all. And with that being said, I will see y'all next time. Let me also say this. People say, well, what if you don't get any views or nobody watches your videos? Here's the thing. If people are meant to see it, Lord knows they will see it. Like I said, this is why I'm distancing myself from social media, because I'm getting ready to write a book and I'm getting ready to do something different. But that doesn't mean that I can't post on my channels because I feel like I need to. So at the end of the day, when it comes down to being healthy and well, that plays a major part of it. It's not just about having people around you just to be around you. No, you need those people because of the dopamine. So it's just like being a vampire stealer, same thing. So with that being said, I thank y'all for joining me for this episode. I appreciate y'all. I do. And whoever sees this, I hope it brings you inspiration. For those of you going through drugs and alcohol, codependency, and people addictions and all this other stuff, now you know where it come from. Dopamine. Now you know how to go about dealing with it and living your life. With that being said, I will see you guys later. Bye.